So hello, everyone. Today, I have a pleasure of talking with Shulamit Ber Levtov, who works with one-to-one female business owners, supporting their mental and emotional well-being as business owners. Hello, Shulamit.
Hey, Anita, so good to be together again.
Oh, thank you for joining me here. So we've known each other for a very long time, and we've just been talking about this. And I think it's about 7 years ago that we first started having conversations about business, being a woman business owner, the impact of business on mental health. Both of us are really, self-employed business owners,
Yeah.
and we both know how challenging it can be for our well-being, for our mental health. And this is the kind of work that you do with your female clients. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit, how did you end up doing what you're doing? How did you end up working in this way with female business owners?
Sure, because in 2015, this wasn't what I was doing. And you
Yeah.
doing this, what you're doing now either. Yeah. So, when I came out of school with my master's degree, I knew that I needed a sustainable business and I knew that I needed to take business training. So I started hanging out. And this is how we met in one of the mastermind, or was it a mastermind or whatever? Anyway, a business training program. We met, and I took a number since then, uh, and worked with a coach, and have been networking and as a therapist running a business, talking to other business owners, and they would, because I was a therapist, sort of let me know in a way that maybe they wouldn't tell other folks how difficult it was to run a business, how isolated they felt, how they felt like nobody got what they were going through, and I was experiencing at the same time also the emotional ups and downs, and for myself of running a business. And at some point, I kind of my business mind and my therapist mind kind of bumped into one another, and I went, "Oh, there needs to be somebody who can provide who can provide support around the emotional side of running a business." And that's how the entrepreneur's therapist was born.
I love that. I think this is, anybody who has run their own business knows how much it takes a toll on your mind, on the way that you, whether you believe in yourself, whether you doubt yourself. Every time you launch something or you try to sell a product or get some clients and it doesn't go right, or in a way that you want it to, it has real impact on you on a mental and emotional level. That self-doubt. I mean, if I think about how many, for example, yoga teachers or wellness practitioners that I know that have left being self-employed and went back into being, employed by somebody else. That's a huge amount. I think it's about 20 or 30 females, women doing that. And it is very, very sad that I think this is one of the things that it's not acknowledged very
Yeah.
often. Like, there is so much of a promise, come and do this thing and be self-employed and build your business. And there are so many business programs out there, but nobody is really talking enough about the impact on the mental health and the lack of sleep, or waking up with anxiety in the middle of the night, worrying about how the hell you're going to pay your mortgage or your
Right.
rent or your bills. Working really long hours. Like, I know that, when I left social care to be fully self-employed, I worked 7 days a week,
Right.
loads more than before. And
Yeah.
that's not something I anticipated. And even though I was doing stuff that I really love, the work that I really love, that exhaustion, that burnout, and really not having any freedom or any time to relax, to have downtime, to be with my family. That really had a huge impact on me.
It does take a toll, and I remember, the time when you were reflecting on this and thinking about, "Wow, how do I want to do things differently?" And while this wasn't the case with what you shared with me, I see it often in my clients where they come to me burnt out, very tired, very depressed or discouraged, and blaming themselves for this.
Yeah.
And for me, that's the consequence of the lack of discussion about this topic. People come and think it's their own problem, when really it's a function of the systemic issues that people are facing, and also a function of reproducing so many of the ideas of the dominant culture around value, our own value as a human being, and around productivity, and around what a successful business is. And, it's so important to be aware and reflective when we have our own businesses about how actually we want to do things, so that we don't. And I was in a very similar situation to you early on in my business, where I was like, hey, wait a minute, I'm working more hours and much harder for much, like when I averaged out the money I was getting paid over the hours that I was that I was working, like I was getting paid much, much less than I would have earned it, if I had been in a salaried position. And of course, things have shifted for me significantly over the years, because I saw that just like you, and started to shift how I relate to myself and my business, so that I'm not reproducing the systems of oppression from the dominant culture in my relationship with myself or my business. And also, of course, I'm fortunate that as a therapist, a therapist with a systems view, I understood that none of this was my fault. But so many people don't see these things, and it's so important to talk about them.
Yeah, I so agree. I mean, you're speaking my language completely, and I love it. I think this is, this is a big part of the kind of when we discuss things in the trainings,
Right?
how within the patriarchal society, it's not designed to support women and women's needs. And if you do have your own business, that doesn't change. Yes, you can try to do things within your business in a different way, but unless you really acknowledge how much of an impact that has on you and your business and your work and your family, you can't really do anything, because it's like, the way that I always think about this, it's almost like a fish in the water.
Mm,
We are so submerged in that, with
mm,
so much conditioning
mm.
over, our lifespan, with so much messaging from the media, from the newspapers, about that our value comes from our productivity, and we are only as valuable as productive we are. And it's that very masculine, this very hard hustling energy that really most women just get really burned out really quickly.
I mean, it's bad for everybody, but it's especially bad for women and other members of underestimated groups, right? Who, just being who we are in the world, requires such an enormous amount of energy, because we face so many barriers, right? That we're navigating everything at a deficit just to begin with.
Yeah. So I wonder, how do you, how do you start working with somebody? I'm always really curious about it. So if somebody comes to you and says that they're really struggling with their business and their mental health is impacted, and, how do you start working with somebody experiencing those challenges?
Well, there are two aspects to the work that I do, and the first one is emotional support.
Mhm.
Because, as you know, although the listener might not, when emotions are high, it's very hard to have a holistic view, right? When you're in distress, what you need first and foremost is care for your distress. And so often that's where I start with folks, is around their distress, their experience of distress, what's behind their distress, and offering them care and offering them support to care for themselves as well. So the way that I would speak to them, they would learn, or care for them, treat them, they also learn to extend that same care to themselves. So it's partly, the first aspect is focused around the emotions, and it's partly emotional support from me, and partly skill building for them around uh, emotional self accompaniment. because so many of us just don't know what to do with big emotions or how to be with ourselves. Certainly before this was my work, that's my experience, was that I was just overwhelmed by everything emotionally and didn't have really very effective at all coping ways of caring for myself, right? They alleviated my distress in the moment, but in the long term created much more significant problems, right? So that's the first half, is the emotional accompaniment. And then often what will happen, and I'm just going to do it now myself. You can see I'm placing my hands on my heart space, and I'm going to take a breath. So that's the kind of thing, a person will get that kind of experience of like, oh, okay. Okay, like I've sort of set my burdens down. They're not gone, but they're not on my shoulders either. And then with that, they have perspective, that they can remember who they are, remember their values, and make decisions about what it is that's distressing them, get clarity about what's distressing them, and make decisions about how they want to address that. And it might be really direct business related stuff, because although I'm not a coach, as you know, we were just talking about boundaries and work boundaries, and like a person might need some support around how to manage their time and their productivity in a way that's supportive of their mental health instead of detrimental to it. So while I'm not a business coach, I will provide strategic information around, let's say, time management and productivity in support of their mental and emotional well-being. Or they might need a thought partner to kind of hash out, okay, I have this dilemma. It's upsetting me, but I still have to solve the dilemma. Now that I'm clear on what my emotions are and what my needs are in this situation, what am I going to do about this dilemma in my business? And they have me as a thought partner as they solve the problem for themselves. So there's the two sides of the work, right? One is the emotional side, and the other is the real, like, what the heck am I going to do in my business side to support my mental and emotional well-being?
I love that. I love that. And what I really loved is you bringing your hands on your chest and taking a breath. And that was such a change in pace.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that, our society is so unkind
Mm,
around.
mm.
It's like this focus on the faster, bigger, louder, more, and on you go. And if you want that emotional support, if you want clarity, you have to slow down. You have to shift the gears. You have to come back within. And, this touching of the chest with your hands, this self-soothing, being here for yourself. It's such an important thing. And so many of us really struggle with it, don't
Mhm.
we? We can be really hard on ourselves. We can take out the big stick
Yes.
when in fact what we need is this loving care for ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really think that's the foundation, when we can relate to ourselves in that way. Um, it takes away 50% of the distress. A distressful situation is still the situation, but at least we're not beating ourselves up over it. And we can bring kindness, that same kindness, to ourselves and our relationship with our business. And we have access to much greater creativity when we're taking that self-connection time, and the space, to allow what's in us to show us the way.
I love that. I love that. I mean, it's such a important thing, this self-trust
Yes.
and really trusting whatever, I often talk about honoring it. Like, can you honor
Mm,
what's coming up, and can you give yourself permission to just, be with it, to acknowledge it,
yeah.
rather than, telling yourself, as we were saying previously, something is wrong with me. This is my fault. I'm not good enough. I should be trying harder. Other people are doing it and I can't do it. Therefore, there is something wrong with me. Not realizing that actually you're comparing yourself with lovely photos on Instagram or
Right. Right.
Facebook, where everybody's looking really happy and having great fun when you are struggling, behind the closed doors. There is so much in here that that it's so useful to unpick. And I love your cat, by the way.
Like
Came
participate.
to check what you're doing, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So if there was, could I ask, like if there was some kind of advice that you would have to somebody who's listening to this podcast or to watching this video,
Yes.
what would that advice be? Like if there was, I mean, I know it's very difficult, but if there was just one piece of advice.
Yes. I do have actually like what I would call the hill I would die on, the one thing that I think is just so important. Running a business is hard work. And we are human beings doing hard work. And we cannot escape the impact of that hard work because we are human. So it's in the nature of our work as entrepreneurs that we face challenges to our mental and emotional well-being. It's an inherent aspect of running a business. So when something happens, when you are struggling, when you're having an emotional or mental health challenge, it's not a question of if, but when and to what degree. And because that's the case, when you're having a hard time, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You're doing something hard. And you're going to feel that. And that's human. There's nothing wrong with you.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And it's like there is so many myths running around, it's, if it's so hard, it's not meant to be. And or it's not the right path for me unless it's aligned and it's flowing and it's easy and, all the doors are open, then it's not working. It's not the right thing. And for me, when I think about this, exactly what you just said, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Because when you step outside of your comfort zone, because you're growing, because you're showing up in a different way, because you are making different decisions, it's gonna be hard.
Yes.
It is gonna be hard. And you're gonna question yourself whether you can do it, whether it's the right decision, especially if there are people around you, and I've experienced that myself, I'm sure you have as well, who will tell you, oh no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Just stay where you are, everything is fine. You just, it's safe.
Yes. I think there's a nuance around this. And I think it's important. We've talked a lot about how difficult it can be. There are really, really great things about being in business for yourself, but everybody talks about those all the time. So I'm not negating any of that. There are many great things around having a business. But if that's all we talk about, then again, as we've said at the beginning, people blame themselves. There's also a nuance around this hard versus easy thing. Because when you're operating in a way that you're checking in with yourself on a regular basis or have support to do that, then you can get clarity about what part of this is hard work and what part of this is harmful and showing me that this is something I need to change. Because there is a way in which if it's too much struggle, it's time to reevaluate because it can be harmful to you. But to go so far and to say, no, it should only always be flowy and great or else you're on the wrong path, that's a problem, right?
Yeah, it's a bit like when people just say love and light to everything, and it's just like, oh God, sometimes it's love and light, sometimes it's I'm really angry because the boundaries have been breached, because there is some kind of injustice and I need to stand up for it in a very fiery way. And I think it's this balance, isn't it? And there are so many other myths out there about, and one that it's really bugging me over the last few months is this thing about 100K
Oh, gee.
earning 100K, and and it's like, yes, at some point, if you're really far into your business, you've got systems in place, you've got clients, you've got good strategy, you've been doing it for a while, you got a lot of business education and support, ongoing support, and you're just leveraging it and you're stepping up and it all works really well. But if you are at the beginning,
Right.
that there is no way that it's going to happen overnight. And sometimes I have those conversations with other coaches or yoga teachers or business owners, and they say, it's like, well, it's been 2 years, and why is it still so hard? And well, it is because it has been only 2 years.
Yes.
And you look at overnight successes, people who are really good and stable in the business, it's like 10, 20 years in the
Yes,
making.
yes, exactly. When I started in private practice, what I was told by them, people who were mentoring me just as a therapist, it would take 5 years, I was told, to fill my practice, to become a full-time practice, have a full roster of clients as a full-time, private practitioner, psychotherapist, and I think that that's quite possibly the same timeline we should look for any service provider, that it does take time, and also, one of the things that all those people who are so shouty about 100K and 2x your revenue and stuff in the online business world, these are people who are referring to a situation in the online business world that existed for them 5 to 10 years ago, and the conditions that applied to what they did then no longer apply to the current business climate in the online world, and they're still out there selling their thing based on their success, which is predicated on a set of conditions that just don't exist anymore.
Yeah. It has changed, hasn't it?
Yes, it
It
has.
definitely has changed over the last few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the current economic climate as well, makes it even much more challenging.
Yeah. I agree.
So, could I ask you if you could share, if I may, a simple practice that somebody could do to check in with themselves? I mean, I know that we are both, fans of focusing, so that embodied listening and working with felt senses and
Yeah.
cards. And so I was wondering if there is a kind of easy practice that you could share with us.
Sure. I'll amplify what we've talked about already, what I did and what we talked about already, which is the hands on the heart space. So the first step that comes even before that is a recognition, oh, wait a minute, something's going on here. Oh, wait a minute, I'm in distress. Oh, wait a minute, I'm having a hard time. It's a first of all, like noticing what's happening. Oh, and what might indicate that to you is maybe what's happening somatically, right? Like your heart is racing, your mouth is dry, whatever it is that's happening. And that can be a signal like, oh, wait a minute, right? So acknowledging, oh, I'm in distress. Oh, something's happening. That's the first step, is acknowledging. And the second step, and for me, that's the hands on the heart space, is validating. Oh, well, no wonder. And that's the reason I talk about all the so-called bad side of being in business, so that then when a person places their hands on their heart, they can say, no wonder I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, because look at the difficulty that I'm facing, or look at the difficult client interaction that just occurred, or um, cash flow is difficult right now and I'm feeling nervous. And so I would be, right? So just the validating. And then just spending a moment with the hands on that. And I'm closing my eyes. Some people might not like to do that, and taking a breath. So I'm going to do that now. Mm, yeah. And sensing the contact of the hands against the one palm against the chest and the other palm against the hand. And sensing the flow of the breath in and out of the body. Kind of like you're sending yourself the message, I'm here with you. You're not alone. Yeah. And that's a little kind of 3-step thing that a person can do for themselves, even on the fly, right? Yeah.
I love that. I love that that first step is this noticing, this acknowledgement, and the acknowledgement of that, yes, no wonder I am struggling.
Yeah.
Of course, it makes sense. It couldn't be any other way within the system or within the context.
Yeah.
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 And there is so many of us that are struggling right now. And I think I love it that this 3-step process can be done anywhere. You don't have to roll out your mat or have any special equipment or
Yeah.
do any special breathing or, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. It's just really our attention on ourselves, our attention on the contact, and our attention on the breath. And these are all somatic tools that we, as yoga teachers in particular, right, or yoga students, this is familiar to us, and using what's familiar in a way that can support us. Yeah.
lovely. Thank you so much, Shulamit. It's been absolute pleasure speaking with you again. I
Yeah.
love chatting with you. And if you could let us know where people can find information about your services and your offers, that would be great.
Sure. Well, my first invitation would be for folks to subscribe to my newsletter. It's at shula.ca/newsletter. And that's hosted on my website. But I don't know about you, I forget to go look at people's stuff. I like to have a reminder. And so that's why I invite folks to subscribe to my newsletter. And shula.ca is my website. And I have all kinds of resources there. This podcast, when it comes out, will be hosted. I'll put a thing on my website. There's blog posts, all kinds of really good free stuff that folks can use, and they can explore working with me there too.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today.